This is
Okay.
working. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
cool.
Caroline, you were saying?
Okay, so I know you have an agenda, but so I don't want to put this on the agenda if it comes in here, but I've been thinking a little bit about this the job income thing. Whether if people have their pay stubs, they're going to have an amount, right? So you say bring 3 months of pay stubs or bring all your pay stub, however many months the directions say. And then you say, pick a pay stub that's typical of your average week. Because we're not asking people to put in all the, every single week or 2 weeks or whatever. We're not asking to enter the data from all their pay stubs. But essentially, we're asking them to either take an average, which I think is hard for people, or just pick a pay stub that's a typical pay stub for you, something like that. But we keep asking them, what's the rate you get paid and how many hours do you work? Which is 2 questions. On the pay stub, there's going to be a gross amount, right? Not including overtime. So why are we asking them rate and hours worked? This is the thing I keep waking up and thinking, am I missing something here? So I'm wondering, and I just don't know. I mean, I think people typically do know what they get paid per hour, but what they get paid per hour is not usually on their pay stub. I don't think. I think usually what the number of hours they get, the number of hours they work is there, and the amount is there. But I don't think the rate is on the pay stub. I may be wrong about that. I mean, Quentin,
I know
you've
for me
probably
it
seen
is.
more pay stubs
I
than I
don't know if
have.
I've seen more
So
than
I think we may be asking people, first of all, we're asking them 2 questions when we could ask them 1. And we're asking DocAssemble to do a calculation that it doesn't have to do. If you know how frequently they get paid and what the amount is on the pay
I don't
stub,
think
then you
that's
don't
the
need those other
question.
questions.
That's not the questions I'm seeing. I'm seeing, what I saw is, is it hourly?
That's a
I
different question.
guess you shouldn't be, is it hourly? And then I guess it asks for the period. So maybe it shouldn't ask for the period. I don't know.
Well, no, you definitely need the period. You have to
Even
have
if
the
it's
period.
hourly.
you work like 30 hours
Yeah.
over a certain amount of time, right? That's what
Yeah.
you know probably.
So it asks, is it hourly? And then it asks how many hours and what's your pay period? And then it asks amount. It figures out hourly rate.
You don't need hourly. What I'm saying is you don't need hourly rate.
They don't say hourly rate. It's calculated for them.
It doesn't
No,
need to be calculated. That's what
I
I'm
think
saying. We
the
don't
hourly
need.
rate is calculated.
Well,
anyway, but yeah, no, I see what you're.
So
We don't
for
ask
our
about hourly
users,
rate. We don't ask about hourly rate.
all I'm saying is we don't even need hourly. It's not information that we need. All we need is amount and period, and the wages and the salary are they're associated with the job, but they're not a calculation. It's just like a characteristic or an attribute. It's like employer name. So it's just so that you can check a box, wages or salary. It doesn't affect the calculations at all.
Well,
So if you just have amount and period, you should be able to complete the whole financial statement.
I think that when I've run into a lot of situations where you need someone's income and they don't have their pay stub with them. So that's, I guess, what I thought of.
Yeah.
And I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't just ask, is your pay hourly or salaried? We should say, do you have your pay stub? And then just let them enter the gross amount if they have their pay stub and skip the whole question about what kind of way they get paid. I think you're right. But it was really just to help people be accurate if they didn't have their pay stub.
And what you're saying, I think, is what I was thinking, is that not everybody's going to have a pay stub. They're not going to be able to. And actually, we know that not everybody gets pay stubs. It's not just that they lose their pay stub. We know there are a lot of employers who don't give pay stubs.
That's a good point.
So in that case, but maybe we could. All I'm thinking is to make it simpler for the user. I mean, especially since Michelle's working on this now, is do you have a pay stub, amount and period? And you do have to ask salary versus wages, but do you have a pay stub? If you do, what's on your pay stub and how often do you get paid? If you don't, then how much do you get paid and how much do you typically work in a week? Or in the pay period, right?
My current calculations don't use an hourly rate. They just use the value. And they just do a different calculation if it's a value. I mean, if it's hourly, they just do a different calculation.
I'm a little
I
confused about
I
how that
can
works, but
paste. It's and maybe it's wrong because I don't know anything about this stuff, but it does value times hours per period times period, and all that is divided by, the times per year. So divided by the period that you're asking for.
but where do you get the amount?
The value, that's the value.
That would be their hourly rate
Sure.
in this case,
Yeah, I mean, it's just what they get paid.
per
And you're
hour.
also asking for
Well, per
hours.
hour or per month if it's not an hourly job, right? Like, yeah, per hour when it's an hourly job, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so
I
that's
think you-
that's right then. It's just, yeah, I think. Yeah, it's just making, I think, anyway, sorry. We kind of already covered the ground, I suppose.
But then the deduction does not have the same calculation. It shouldn't, right? Because like if you get paid per hour, you don't get deducted per hour, or do you get deducted per hour?
No, you don't get deducted per hour. I think there's something not quite right
So,
with this.
yeah, that's what I was asking the other day. Yeah.
We don't make people deduct their, we don't make them say the formula for the deductions. We just have them look at their pay stub. That's the only way they can really give us their deductions.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just gonna need help with the math there. Okay.
So maybe not do deep dive. I won't take up deep dive. Maybe Michelle and I can work on this a little bit more. I think I just wanted to run that, check that by you and see. And I think Quentin, you and I agree that we just say, what's on your pay stub? Or do you have a pay stub? If you don't have a pay stub, then we go through more questions if you do have a pay stub. Because the other thing is if they don't have a pay stub, it's going to be hard for them to do deductions. They're going to have to guess.
Right. And I
Right.
think the other, it's like a really, it's like, I think it's a unique UX question for each interview. Because if someone doesn't have to go to the level of saying their deductions, isn't it easier for them to just, I think people do know, hey, I make, $8.75 an hour and I work
Yeah.
about 30 hours a week. That's something they can answer really quickly compared
Right,
to looking at their
right.
pay stub.
Right.
If we don't need to go into the level of the details of deductions and everything.
You mean for other financial statements? You're thinking for this
Yeah.
particular element in the PY file. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think sometimes people will want to use the simplest way, and the simplest way might be asking them their hourly rate and the number of hours they work.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably say, for my consulting work, oh, this is what I bill, and I do like 8 hours a week or something, right? So that I
Yeah.
could answer that question without actually having to look at my
And it's
real
probably
accounting book.
easier to answer that than it is to, off the top of your head, say how much you get paid. Because what you do is you probably in your head would calculate 8 hours times your rate and then say that's what it is.
Yeah,
Um,
but in some cases, I would need to give like a profit and loss statement, right? So it depends totally on the real,
Yeah.
how the need of the person getting information from you.
right,
What's easier?
right. Okay, and then I think I'd have a coding question I can just ask Michelle outside, because I think I've done all the expenses. I've done them two different ways. I've done them using your PY file, what do you call it? And then I'm realizing that because we have more expenses than you have in your definition, whether what I'm not quite sure is how to pull out you asked a period. What I'm not sure is how to pull out from that what either the weekly is or the thing. And I just have to look at the code for that. But I think Michelle you can probably help me figure that out, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Can give it a shot.
Okay. All right. So I'll check in with you. So I won't take up your deep dive stuff.
The one thing that I wanted to cover is that the custom data type before you leave is that the custom data type has changed. So for example, if we update the server that is running 209A, the birth date thing probably won't work unless we also update the code.
Is that for all of us or for me?
Well, 209A is relevant to you, so I just thought I'd
Right,
let you
so,
know since you were
so
here.
what are
I
we,
mean,
what do we need to do? Do we need to update the 209A interview?
we need to update to include the custom data type file or whatever, because now it'll only so it won't run if it's just on the server. It'll run if you include that specific thing in your interview.
Oh, I guess I understood the change log differently, but Jonathan explained what the change is a different way for you.
Oh, I just read the change log. It said you have to include it, right?
Let's see if we can find it.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Because I really don't even know what you're talking about. I thought when you said that Management Monday, I thought, oh, that's going to be a conversation I would have with Michelle outside this meeting.
Maybe.
Let me just.
Oh, because the birth date, that's the one that Lily did, right? When you say, is that a custom data type?
Oh, it will only be inserted if the interview uses the custom data type.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that Lily did the birth date?
Yeah, that's not what I wanted. If it's not
Still is
pulled in
implicit.
manually by a feature, yeah, it's still implicit.
I don't know
Still,
what you
it does
got.
mean that there's lighter pages. You don't have a bunch of irrelevant JavaScript on every page.
Yep, it's not what I
So,
was looking for
Makes the
though.
page faster to load, but it's different. Yeah, you still have to namespace or somehow figure out how to make unique names for your data types. That doesn't change that part.
Oh,
As far as I can tell.
Like,
We'll just
so it
experiment.
makes it harder to develop. Again, it's just still
That's
hard
fine.
to develop.
This is updated on the dev server, by the way. I just upgraded this morning to see. So
Okay.
you could try
I mean,
it
it
out there,
doesn't
see what it
change
does.
anything then, so it doesn't
do I
matter.
need to know this now?
Possibly not.
Okay.
We did this because it was backwards compatible this way. And by the way, like I saw you had a question about a feature flag. Feature flag to me, I meant a configuration setting that would tell people to use the new or the old behavior for custom data types. That's what a feature flag usually is. It's like something that you change server-wide behavior and turn it on or
I
off.
thought you meant the feature block. I was confused, but I was like, this is the words he said, so I'll say the words.
That's what, in general, that's what a feature flag is. It's like you release a new feature in your product. You want people to be able to turn it on or off while they get used to the new feature.
Mhm.
Sorry, if we're keeping beyond the part that's interesting to you, I think, Caroline. But
Yeah, I don't think I need any more. Except Quentin, at some point I need help. I got to upgrade these servers. And I'm
Okay.
stuck on the env.list file. I can't even find it anywhere. I've been hunting and pecking.
I think it's in the root user.
I can't find it. I looked, I can't find it.
Oh,
But maybe
okay.
it's there in front of my face. I do ls, right, to find it.
Yeah, but I can try. I can see if I'm able to log on and
Well, I
look at it,
don't
see
want to
if that's
use
all
your
you
deep
need.
dive time. I just I have done, I mean, I can either ask Jonathan on the Slack channel, or I can bug you. It's up to you what you want me to do next.
See if I can log onto it from this computer. I'm in the office today, so I don't know if I can. If I have the right SSH keys. But yeah, you can book a time with me too.
I can book a time. How do
Yeah.
how do I book a time? Do you have a calendar?
I do.
Oh,
Calendar.
oh, you have Calendly. Yay. Do you have to pay for that?
I do. I use it for my work.
Okay. I'll book a time.
There's a free tier, which maybe I could jump down to. I thought I was like, oh, I'm going to keep some stuff in my Google Calendar and some stuff in my
Oh,
Suffolk
yeah.
Calendar, and you need to pay for that feature. But it turns out I just always want everything on my Suffolk Calendar.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people at Suffolk will book meetings that would conflict
Sure.
with my other stuff. So
Okay. All right. I will, I'll book a time.
okay.
Okay. So I'll hop off so you guys can get on with your stuff.
Later, Caroline.
Bye-bye. Did I leave? No.
Nope.
Yep. All right. So no Bryce today. Yeah, see, I keep adding new things like I'm going to work on this and not working on them. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with my ideas of new things we'll do. I guess I'll just put in session saving feature if we have time to talk about it. Okay, this is probably left at the top because it was my issue that I talked about last week. And it turned out I only had like 2 hours of work I could do. So I didn't get too far. A few people have asked for this feature, which is letting someone automate multiple forms at once in the Weaver. And it feels like it's actually not a huge feature. It's probably just requiring some testing. Actually, before I just start talking about the first item, are there other items we should add to the list?
I don't have any.
Okay, great. Well, this is a shorter week maybe. So that like the big concept is someone can upload 4 templates at once. Probably should be able to do a mix of PDF and Word documents. It should scan all the variables in those documents and just show them one time. So like it would merge the ones that are the same variable, basically. So, and it would generate the code for the bundle. So it had all of the templates in the bundle. So that's the basic idea. And then I guess we would let people customize the rules for what makes the bundle that item turned on or off in the bundle. That would be something to let people do manually later still.
So is this specifically for an umbrella interview or just to be able to?
Umbrella interview might not even really be the right idea, but I guess it's like a specific kind of umbrella interview. It's an umbrella interview where maybe they only ever use these forms and those forms are never pulled out into separate interviews. It's just that this is one interview that assembles multiple templates. And umbrella definitely covers that description, but it also might mean a more modular interview where there's different things that you pull in and mix and match into different places.
Okay. Does it generate separate files?
I don't think that needs to be MVP.
Okay.
Because if someone's has that need, they might want to just automate them one at a time.
Okay.
That would get complicated, wouldn't it? Because if you wanted to be able to generate those separate YAML files, but there's a shared set of questions. I mean, that's the main reason you're using this multiple templates at once automation approach. Then how do you decide what file the questions that are shared live in?
Yeah, it's a complex question. Yeah.
I guess we could generate
And you could figure out which, items are shared between which interviews
I think it probably will be,
and create.
the way I see it is that when you have separate YAML files, you don't necessarily separate the questions. If you separate the questions, that looks almost like the real umbrella interview where you have separate interviews for each template. So it might be the case that where you could have a YAML file for questions, have a YAML file for output or something like that. Just a different way of cutting it.
Good point. If we did the separate files, they would each have to have their own interview order block, right?
Not necessarily, they could just be files that were included. I think the most complicated bit would be doing the interview order block. Like that would need probably customization by the developer, maybe not. I mean, if you just do separate files and one order block, it simplifies things, because I imagine you could make a Venn diagram of the shared questions and then just have a separate file for whatever's shared between interviews, if there is a value shared between, you know, in whatever Venn diagram slice that is. But interview order becomes complicated at that point.
Yeah.
When I do an
think
umbrella
overlap-
interview, I usually do have like a shared set of interview order. Each one has their interview order block. I reference it in the parent interview at the appropriate time, basically. So it's like a child interview order block. But
Yeah, but then like, what if they said, you know, they wanted this question first and then this question, and then they have question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 1 and 3 are in one shared interview file, and question 2 is in a different one because it's not shared by those two, right? It's a confusing concept. I'm not sure I captured it well.
we could just do a draft interview order.
Just leave it untriggered.
Yeah.
Okay.
That could be like an easy thing to do, which would save people. I'm just imagining, like in almost all the cases, people have this need to automate 4 templates at once. It's a big interview, right? It
Yeah.
might have hundreds of questions in it. So if you could save someone the work of having to manually type that information, it might be nice. But also, you care about by definition, you care about automating those 4 templates together as one seamless experience for the user. You don't care about what document you're producing at that moment. And we found that with the 209A, we started to have these mini order blocks in each file. But we kind of threw those away pretty quickly because we were like, oh, we want to get this information about the defendant's birth date up front, even though it goes in 4 different forms. And in one place, it's the age, one place, it's the birth date. You know, you don't really respect the order of the templates at all if you want to give the person a good user experience. So there's that might have been what you were already saying. Like there's a shared interview order block, which is really all you care about. You don't really want to like call them mechanically. Okay, now I'm doing the plaintiff information form. Now I'm doing the defendant information form.
Yep,
If
that's
there's
exactly
something
what
to
I was
ask
saying.
Yeah. But maybe this like draft interview order block, which is just a list of variables, is helpful, easy thing we can add. Or maybe it's not something we should do because it's confusing to people if it's not used.
I mean, we could make it and comment it out, and then it's clear
Ask
that
a
it's not
question,
being
and do you need
used.
it? If they need it, well, then we insert it. If they don't, we don't.
Yeah. Okay. That makes me think the separate files aren't really needed, because that's also like it's optimizing for a future use that's not really there yet.
Yeah.
But it's a much lower overhead thing.
Mhm.
For me, it might be enough just to scope some of these questions out now, because I don't know when I would work on it, but I guess if anyone else wanted to work on it, they could too. I just know I'm going to have probably being pulled in a bunch of different directions at once on stuff. So I don't know when it will be worked on, but this is good to talk through what the future might look like. Any other ideas people had about this?
Well, I think partially I also don't know. We at some point, made this document about like, what are the different goals for the different purposes? And I'm not sure which of those this is aiming at, so I don't feel like I know what contribution would be helpful.
The goals for the different purposes. I guess I'm a little lost about what that is.
So we had basically this is sounds to me like the discussion on exporting data and how you can export and import data. And there were different goals for different audiences for that. And I'm not sure which.
This is not about exporting data, this multi-form.
Oh, sorry.
We could get
Oh
back
my
to that
gosh,
one.
I'm
I
so
don't want to
tired,
jump
sure.
the queue for that
No.
one. But okay.
I'm so tired. For multi-form. I don't know.
We okay for now on this one? People,
I think so.
I think there's an issue already for this. I'll link the issue. Don't actually want to switch the tab because that's a different shared window. Pause my share and bring it over here.
Was it requested by someone?
Yeah, it was requested from somebody from like our new Pew grant. I think Matt Newstead was asking about it for a form he's already working on independently. But it's just like, it's one of those features we thought we would need at the beginning. We keep postponing the actual work on it. So I was like, oh, once one other person than us suggested, it feels like it's worth for us working on something we'd already identified as a need.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem such a lift. You would just collect variables from multiple PDFs, right? And just use
mean
those
Weaver?
instead of the individual PDF.
In Docker assembly, assembly line.
You're in assembly line, not
Oh, that's why I'm not finding it. Thank you.
Weaver. Yeah, that's what Lily was saying, I think.
Yep, I just got that. Sorry. I was thinking, do we close it as like it won't fix? Yeah, here we go. Here's the issue. Back in October. We have it on our milestone for this grant already anyway. I'll add this to the issue thread because it'll be easier to track there. It's annoying that doesn't let you keep the format.
Yeah, it's great. I love Teams. So useful.
This isn't the Teams thing.
Oh,
it's Google
Google
Drive.
Docs. Google Docs. Yeah, sorry. I love them both. I love them both. Truly in my heart. Could we be compatible? No. I don't think so. I'm not saying it's easy, but
Good enough. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So those were good notes to have there. Kiln metrics.
oh, that was supposed to be lower on the list, but I'm just trying to figure out. I had a document for this out last week, but what would be reasonable to, so basically this would be, I don't know where to put it, I suppose in the, technically speaking, I don't know where to put it. I don't want another file like a config file, but it would be something that people could choose to turn off and on. and that we'd ask in the setup interview. And the question kind of is, what would be reasonable to ask? Maybe I should start typing this. Sorry, not in the right place. What would be reasonable to ask, and then how to use, like, what would be reasonable to ask, what would be useful, and how then would we use it? I do remember one thought where I went, it could tell us if AL Kiln was failing, if all the tests on different organizations were failing. One organization isn't sufficient because it's just, their server could be having an issue, which is like it wouldn't be possible, I don't think, to distinguish between those two otherwise. But so that's why I say kind of useful.
So I think a lot of people want to collect analytics data, like what you're describing there. And they do sometimes do it on open source tools too. It's usually pretty controversial.
Yeah.
I suspect it might not make sense to invest the effort in it for this one, because let's say you get 50% return. 50% like, oh yeah, sure, I want to help out project, I'll let you collect the data. Then how much effort is put in
right
to
now,
get
at least it's true. Maybe this is not the time.
Maybe a survey would be just as high of a response rate though. But it depends on what you want to get from the data. If you just want to know who's using it and what features do you value, that's easy, and it might be more welcoming than just submit an issue.
Yeah.
But if it is it working or is it failing? And I need an automated report because people who it fails for just will give up. That's not going to help you with that question to send a survey out. So depends. Usually it's used on much larger projects than ours, I guess, too. There's like a huge issue, or like people were very upset about that being added to Audacity, which is an audio editor. Sometimes use, for example, like it's generally controversial when people want to add it to an open source tool. Then they fork it, and then there's a version that doesn't have the analytics.
Yeah.
What version people don't like their data being monetized by open source. And this isn't monetizing, but it's just.
Yep. I mean, it would have to discuss, I mean, first of all, it would definitely be opt-in. And secondly, it would have to, explain clearly what it is collecting. If that doesn't make sense to the people using it, then sure. But like the types of things that I had in mind to collect were very like de-identified. So
are there any data you can get from NPM repo? Can you see like number of downloads, for example?
Yeah, you can see number of downloads. It doesn't like say like number of organizations, and though I wouldn't store the organization knowing that it's a different organization, I guess there's no way to know that. Never mind, not it being anonymized. But yeah, that's not, I don't think that's the kind of information.
Well, if someone
hoping
downloads
for.
it, they're not necessarily using it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I don't find particularly useful about the NPM number of downloads.
Well, it's like overinflated by thing, like because you pull it in every time you run the test, right? So every commit would get a trigger a download. Am I right?
Probably.
I think
I don't see how they would tell the difference.
How do you track it? If we say, okay, let's track it, do you need to add some code in your program, or how?
Yeah, we need to code it. But I think the answer of this isn't the time is sufficient for now. I don't want to take up more time if this isn't the time for this. So
do a GitHub search too. So like the kind of people who might be willing to collaborate and share that data might be likely, because it's a, it's a pretty much established convention for DocAssemble. to have a public GitHub repo with a particular name, could you come up with a GitHub search parameter that would help you identify who's has it turned on for their repos?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell who has it turned on, but I would be able to tell who has installed it. It itself, GitHub does a kind of tracking for that as well. It doesn't do it completely, I don't think, but it does do that kind of tracking. But I'm still not sure that's the kind of information I'm looking for.
I guess from the functionality point of view, it could be useful to track anonymous. You use the data in terms of which feature is most popular, which one people experienced errors often, so that
Yeah, that's the
can-
kind of thing I'm more interested in.
right. So that
And
you can
detecting like failure of the system. But some of that, like Quentin said, can be done in a survey. Those surveys not really as accurate as what's actually happening. So, yeah, I mean, for certain metrics.
Hard, you're working in the void, right? You have to figure out how many people are using it. I'm always astounded by seeing people who lurk on the Slack or DocAssemble when they talk about the work that they've done. There's a lot there that's invisible. And it is hard to just be working in the void and not knowing how people use your thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the nature of open source.
Yeah. I don't necessarily feel that that's a reason to like, I think it's situation specific, whether that is, unchangeable for that specific situation. So definitely like to still consider options.
Well,
But
I think
yeah.
something that would help too is like maybe write down some notes for like what's the value proposition
here,
to
yeah.
the person who shares the data with you.
Okay.
A little bit more about that part, and then because that's the balance is like, hey, here's something we think we need to improve the product, and then the balance from the user is like, why would I share information about my proprietary or secure thing, or like why would I just generally, I don't like to share information, why would I share it with you? So that you have to sell the benefit, and if that's a really compelling use case, then it's worth the cost in terms of time of setting it up. The only other thing I would say is like, is there some existing analytics package you can integrate with that does this? So I know that's the way that I go back to Audacity. They were integrating a existing analytics gathering module whose purpose was to let you get anonymized usage statistics about their thing.
I can think about that. It seems to me currently that I want very like kiln specific things, and that would be what is useful, not generic. Like,
yeah, it depends. It's not about the analytics it actually gathers, but the framework for configuring, turning on, sending,
okay.
there might be some things that it helps you do that you wouldn't have to reinvent, even just coming up with the name of a class or something, right? Like, but it might not be. I don't actually know the answer for that. I mean, I would love to get in. Yeah, anyway, I suspect that it might just be a challenging task, but I get why you want it to do it. So
yeah, well, it could start small. I wouldn't be implementing the kitchen sink to begin with. So
right now we
But
check interview data in Google Analytics, right? Would that also be useful for you? I mean, to you and Google Analytics, would that be a tool?
I don't want to collect the same kind of data that Google Analytics wants to collect, and we're not running a website, so I'm not exactly sure how we'd apply it to this particular situation, right? It's not tracking clicks or things like that. It's tracking different information.
Is there a way to change the structure of the AL kiln so that the default, because here's something that you could make it really an easy lift.
Mhm.
We add some value by centralizing some part of the way AL kiln works to a
Mhm.
web server we control. That then we make it really easy for somebody to swap out and use their own server as a replacement. But the low friction way is for us to use ours. That could be a value add. But I mean, of course, if we're like synthetically designing it for the benefit of collecting metrics, that's less true. But if there is something we can do that's helpful there that uses a web server, and then we can get usage information from that, you might have a double value to that change.
I'm trying to think what I mean. I got to think about like what functionality could be offloaded.
Like some formatting, like some microservice, or it seems silly, but it's just like it's a way you might end up having to design something like that to collect the statistics anyway, if you didn't integrate this.
Well, I think we would do something more like web scraping, possibly. Or sending information to a server from a repository. I mean, there would be a server, but getting everyone's like during the test run, you could send information to a separate server, but running things for the tests on a server, I'm just thinking, what would we run on our server instead of on a different server?
Yeah, I don't know what that would be either. I was thinking more in the lines of like what are CDN resources people would pull in. That's not that helpful. We had a JavaScript runtime thing that we hosted on our site. I don't know.
I mean,
And it would have to be something
we
that
can
would
make
have
our
more-
package CDN, but that seems sketchy.
What's that?
We could, have them, people can include jQuery in an NPM install, but they can also include jQuery from a CDN. So it might be possible to have them pull the library from a CDN, but that seems very sketchy to me. Like I would not want to use someone's library if it was installing from their own website, not from NPM.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue, right? Like the people who are running tests, they might also be security conscious in ways that would not make us having any central control of analytics be to fit the value they're getting out of the tests. So
Yep. Yeah, I
it's just the tension there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, thoughts. All right, something to think about in the future.
Let's see, it's gonna be-
See for
So we did a little
complete.
bit of discussion of the toolbox income module. I'll just write that down here. Okay. And I saw you had a bunch of other like individual questions popping up on Slack and on Teams. So I assume we could talk through some of those ideas.
Yep.
You have like the overall architecture for this thought out. You want to share like what the
I mean, I can share
Awareness.
what it looks like now. I have the code that I've been using. Trying to think if maybe I want to put it in a editor instead of just in the
Playground.
playground, because it's just so hard to see on there. Hang on just a second. I'll and then so income list. So one was the job, which I mean the name, which I still don't understand what we want the name to be, because in DocAssemble Slack, I liked the suggestion of pay stub, but maybe you've thought better of it, and it should go back to being called something like a job, something to do with jobs. But a pay stub it wasn't income list, but it didn't need market value and all that kind of stuff. So I just made it its own thing. Like an income list, it can get its list of, you said types, I said sources. I still don't think that's the right name. I've played a lot with names, trying to find ways that things could be named a bit differently, but it has line items. And when you get line items, you can filter them by source and transaction type, also a name I'm not super fond of. You can get the absolute period value. And everything uses decimal.
What is the absolute period value?
It's just without a delta, so it's not negative or positive. And the period value just adds a negative if it's a deduction. I'm not sure about this data structure either. I'm not sure what to call transaction type. I asked a few questions about that on our channel and on with other people. And I was like, what is the category for it being some money that goes in or some money that goes out? No one had an answer. So I don't have a good name, and I don't have a good identifier. Should it be in and out? Should it be deduction? Can't be expense. But I don't know the financial words for these things. It has a gross of all the line items. It has a net of all the line items. And a total, which is just the net, because you said total was important, right?
The idea is you should be able to combine a job with a line item type job or whatever you call it, pay stub, right? So you want to collect multiple sources of income for somebody. You should be able to use one method to total them all up, potentially.
I thought we said that job and a multi-part job were separate object classes.
But they should be signature compatible. I think that's the duck typing idea we were talking about.
Okay. Then I'll probably have to work on some of the names for the job as well, because it has a .net and it had a net amount and a .net, and those are also names that I wanted to talk about. Employer name, address, phone, normalized hours, and 2 JSON.
Why aren't you? Yeah, I wonder why you don't inherit from the income list.
Because there was stuff that I wanted to do that broke the compatibility between the two. And also, why would you have market value and owners if that doesn't make sense for pay stub?
Well, I just noticing you have a bunch of methods here, which you wouldn't have to copy and paste, right? Like they'd exist in one place already.
Right, but
They
it doesn't
inherit
have an amount, right? So this is a list of periodic values. This is a list of values, but it can't be a list of incomes, because an income has its own hourly. It has its own period. It has its own hours per period. It has all this information that these items, these line items, do not have, because they have to access their parent's information, right? They have to, what you call their parent. their container, right? This has
container?
this has hours and periods and all that kind of information. And so when you add up, for example, absolute period value, if you can see, it's the line item value, but it's the pay stubs, hours per period, etc. Right? It's not the items period, because we can't give the item a period, or at least so you described in Slack, or so I understood from what you described, but maybe we miscommunicated our needs. So
No, but so there's two APIs, right? So Python doesn't really have interfaces, or I guess it does, but it's not like they are in other languages because it's so loosely typed, or at least that may not be the right description anyway. But
it's not.
think of this like an interface, right? So an income has an amount method. You don't really care about the details of how it works. You don't care that one version of that income has a hourly wage and one doesn't. And in fact, the income type the hourly wage was optional. I think it ended up making sense to move it up away from job, but maybe it shouldn't have been. Maybe that should belong to a job and not an income. Income's the more general class. But if they have the same, if they all have an amount method, then you can say, okay, for all of the mixed types of incomes in this list, tell me the amount and we'll add it up. And then for a pay stub, it would be the net amount, right? It would be the net of the deductions and the different type classes of income the person had. But it would still
this
report.
isn't the, so that would be gross or net. That would not be amount for the job or total, right? For the whole
Why?
pay stub, these are the ways to add it up. And for the line items themselves, their amount has to be calculated differently than the income value amount, because they cannot use their own hours per period or their own period. They have to use that of the pay stub.
Doesn't matter though. I don't understand what you're trying to say there, I guess. Why does
I
it?
guess I'm not understanding what you're trying to say. So
They work differently, but if you have a common way to talk to them, you don't have to worry about the implementation details when you want to work with them in aggregate. So you make a choice to say, okay, when I'm asked to tell what the amount is, does that mean net or gross? And you have to make a choice there. But it's really convenient to be able to say, what's all of the ways this person makes money? What's their total annual income? And add them all up together, right?
but they have a total. It has a total.
But not everything's going to be a pay stub. Like someone has different types of income. They might have a pension. They might have Social Security income. They might get money from, I mean, it's unlikely for some of these they're going to be mixed and matched with hourly.
Income list has a total. I'm just doing it differently. I'm just using my own functions to get the total, right?
Oh,
Like
so you're,
income doesn't have a net. I'm just giving the same signature here. That's the whole reason total is here. You know.
that is what I'm saying. So you're saying it works differently. I'm like, yep, that's fine. Just make the signature match. So
total, right?
but you could do that by having it inherit from the same parent class and then not have to repeat yourself some of the classes, some of the methods here, like the employer
But
name,
the
address, phone, for example.
the internals of total need to be different. So
Yes,
I
I
can't
know.
just inherit. I don't understand.
Why not? That's how classes work.
Well, I'm overwriting everything that income list has except the stuff that I don't need. Like everything else that I need, I have to overwrite it.
Here's one example. I don't know if there's really like nothing it shares, but it's just the whole point is, right, like you have some heterogeneous types of information about your annual income that you want to be able to represent, and they should be able to be aggregated in a list, I think. So having them inherit from the same class would be helpful. It might only be this method that's shared, but I suspect, well, here's the toJSON method.
This is a little bit different because you get the period value of the item, but you use the self period. So it's not the same. Normalize hours might be the same.
Well,
but
it's okay.
Normalize hours is part of a job. It's not part of an income list. Employer name, address, phone, I think is part of a job, not a part of an income list. This is a mix of job and income list.
All right. So I think if there's places where they share the same goal, it makes sense to inherit. And even if you override every method, it kind of is a way to say we're trying to implement the same interface. There might be a better way in Python than that.
But
Like I said, I
but
haven't
would
experimented with the interface.
I would need to.
I don't think any of the
recreate
things you're saying are really relevant to this, like this issue of like inheritance. So it might.
I do think,
I
I
don't
think
think
if
we're
this
having a discussion,
if this inherits market value, and market value doesn't work in here because it would need totally different calculations and it would just error, then I think that is relevant. Like,
So then
I
that's
haven't
where
tried it
you
yet. I
override.
can try seeing if market value would work, but
So it sounds like market value shouldn't really belong to an income, but maybe to a job, or sorry, rather to an asset. I mean, you might just look and see, like, because you're copying these classes in, right? It's not the same class.
file. There
So-
are a lot of things I don't understand about like the differences between assets and incomes and jobs, and that I part of why like more stuff is in here is that I don't know how to touch the other ones. So it might take a more in-depth discussion to,
Okay, but every time I try to say something, you interrupt me to say why it doesn't make sense for what you're doing. But it's like it's kind of hard to discuss in that context. But
okay.
um,
Lily, did you have a thing you were trying to say? Lily, you're muted if you're talking.
Oh, sorry, right.
Yeah.
No, regarding the inheritance, I was just thinking, if you inherit something that you don't need, and if it's causing a problem, you override it, right? That
But if I'm overriding everything, then at what point is it useful to inherit?
well, so it's like there's a fundamental thing, which is in a list, you want to be able to store all of the ways that people earn money or have money coming into them, rather. Some of it comes from assets, some of it comes from working, some of it comes from entitlements. And they should all work the same basic way. There should be some shared functionality that they all have.
You're saying that like,
The pay stub should be equivalent to a job, right? Didn't we? We decided that.
income should be able to use pay stub in the same way that it uses all its other papers.
And I think in practice, I think the way that I used it in my Social Security interview was like, okay, these all inherit from the income class, but I don't store them in one heterogeneous list. I just like say, okay, add the assets, add the jobs, add the incomes that are of non-job type. And they're stored in separate named lists. But they all, in every case, I called the same method for each of them, right? Like I called the dot total method. It's like add assets dot total plus incomes dot total plus jobs dot total. So that's the main thing that you need in common is probably just the total method, but more than anything else.
Okay, I think it is important to
I mean, to me, the clearest way is to have them inherit from a base class. And if you're like, oh, I'm overriding this, that tells me where is this inheriting and does it belong at a different level of the hierarchy?
the place this was inheriting from though was income list, which I don't know if that's useful for an income list to use an income list. So I mean, I would want to mimic the assets or jobs or whatever, right? Or simple values. So that would be a bit more complicated.
Well, no, it's not mimicking. I mean, it's having signature compatibility, but would inherit from the same place a job does probably. wouldn't it? I mean, it's
AL
equivalent to a job.
income.
It's at the same hierarchy level.
I mean, all AL income has is amount, and I'm thinking of calling that total. So that would work fine.
Okay, well, I don't think you can, I mean, amount and total are different things from my memory of an amount belongs to a value and a total belongs to a list of values.
So this is a list. Okay, so job, then it can't inherit from income. I mean, it can't inherit from AL income because it's not, it's a,
Why not? It
a
sounds like that's the
list.
right place for it to go. I actually don't think it is. So that's, we could jump to that part now if you
maybe
want.
that would be useful.
I don't think it's a list. And I think that would help you free you from some of the challenge you're having with representing the different parts a little bit lower down. So I think you're trying to represent something that's too restrictive in some ways.
Okay,
So I think you have your values that are positive, that are money that you make in your job that are listed on your pay stub. But I'm trying to avoid giving them labels.
I would love labels if you could give
For
them
now,
labels.
I'm trying to avoid giving them labels.
Okay, because I've been trying to give them labels for a while. So any labels are quite welcome.
And then you have the things that are clearly deductions, right? So that does get a label. Those are the deductions, and that in some cases, you know what those are in advance, but it's probably going to be interview specific. We saw that it was like, how much do you pay in taxes? What do you pay for health insurance? And so on. And the things that are positive incomes are, the positive parts of your pay stub are things like wages being the biggest category. Everything has wages almost. Tips, and was there a third category?
There were
Oh,
lots of categories. Commissions, there were
Commission.
lots of
Let's-
categories.
Let's write them all out, actually. That might be helpful to do. if
So
it's already-
just a second. I had like a whole passage, and it depends where you're getting them. So
Well, we don't need all, oh, okay, we don't need all of them, but just like thinking about categories helps us design the class a little. That's good.
so
That's
these
good
are
to
some
say.
notes that I took on.
So I wouldn't call it hourly wage, I would just call it wages, because hourly gets confusing because you have different ways you're treating hourly and other wages. But
I
it doesn't
mean,
really care
this
for your
is
pay
just a
stub.
this is, yeah,
I would delete hourly because I think it will confuse you. There's a reason why I'm.
it's hourly is important for me to keep track that it's hourly. Like, I'm not going to remember
Not
that
always
wages are hourly.
Okay. It's
They're not always
hourly.
hourly.
Salary is the same thing as wages.
I'm very confused because I was told that these are different things, but I don't know what you mean by the same thing. I don't know if you mean they're in the same category or,
Wages is used to apply, is
The Senate.
applicable to both hourly income and salary income. I've seen that outside of our project.
so there's hourly income and salary income, and those are separate things.
Well, let's say you're looking at a pay stub. It might say your salary on there somewhere, but salary usually means what you make for the whole year. So you wouldn't want to write that down as the answer for one pay stub.
I mean,
'Cause
we're
the
just thinking
deductions
about
wouldn't be written for the
categories
year.
right now. We're not like thinking of the names that I'm going to ask in questions right now, right? Like these are not anywhere in these classes. None of these things are in these classes.
No, the goal is to write them down just so we know like what they are like, but you're right. We don't have to get it
So
exactly right. No, deductions aren't the same thing to me.
I mean,
what-
they're categories. I don't know. Like, I mean, these are not words that are going to go in our.
So we have
In the
in
class.
and
You have the
out.
positive and the negative things. I think those are, yeah. Leslie, sorry.
Part of it is in, part of out, part of it is out. Deduction is out, right?
Yeah,
So you're saying you want them in two separate lists. One is in, one is out. Is that what you're trying to say?
well, imagine how you're going to collect this. And this is how like accountants work too. they don't have positive and negative values generally. Well, maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm overgeneralizing accountants from my like one internship at a credit union. I think in and out's a really good way to simplify it. Yeah. I think it's going to be much easier to have people express those as positive numbers when they're entering them, asking people to remember the minus sign or doing multiplying it by minus sign.
That's why this was handling turning it positive and negative, right? So that the person doesn't have to. So
but why are you
the
storing that as an
developer,
attribute of each thing? If every half of them are going to have one attribute and half the other, why wouldn't and no other possible values?
no,
why wouldn't that just be two
that's
different
not.
lists?
I'm just trying to say that I'm not asking the user if they're positive or negative value. We're talking about the data structure. I'm not trying to circumvent the data structure we're discussing right now.
No, okay.
You just specifically mentioned, like.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to
Whether
jump to a
this-
follow-up from that. Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
I understand that you're saying there's different parts of the data structure. So if we go back down, like this is just an idea for simplifying.
Mhm.
Like I'm not writing this, although I always have strong opinions, but don't take them, you know, as like this.
I like opinions. They're useful.
So you're doing some operation on each item. You're checking an attribute that it has. And then you are saying this one's going to be treated as positive, this one's going to be treated as negative. But why don't you just
But you're saying two separate lists, right? This
and then
is the
subtract
data
one from the other.
structure you're talking about, right?
Essentially, so yes.
Okay.
And the only question I have is there a top level idea, which could be the DA list, like you're inheriting from here, and then a attribute that is the negative? Like you could do that. It's a bit confusing to have things contained in a list and then an attribute of the list, but that's a doc assemble pattern. That's not totally new. But maybe having the in and the out is better, the way you're having it here. And I like in and out. I guess those are pretty clear. We could probably ask an accountant if there's a better term for in. Out would easily be renamed deductions. And you could call the other types of thing incomes, but it's confusing because we have income meaning something different in this module file.
Well, I don't like, I would want to ask an accountant if deductions was different from garnishments, which was different from dues, or if it was a category, right? Like, I don't know what that word means in, right?
I don't think payments make sense, but that's, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be over editing, just brainstorm things.
Yep. No, but if payments doesn't make sense, then that's good to know for you at least. I just don't feel like I know enough about these categories at all to make judgments on them.
Well, we could try just Googling what are deductions on a pay stub.
I thought I tried and wasn't.
I think
Wow,
in
fine.
and out are straightforward. I mean, if you go to like a accountant sheet, maybe the very top one, they would say assets, liabilities. Do we want to get into that? Probably not.
Assets and liabilities.
For us,
Yeah.
right, for us, all we need is to fill up this form. This form says how much you're making, how much you're spending, things like that. So I think if we just use common sense, use common knowledge terms that people, technical and non-technical people both understand, that should be good enough for our purpose, right?
Which maybe makes it like in and out be the best labels
Yeah, that's what I.
for what you're saying. We don't try to help people. We don't want to mix up people who think there's a technical meaning for what we call it, and there's not. There is.
Right, yeah, there's.
I'm certainly finding it confusing.
It does look like deductions covers everything you take off of your payroll, your pay stub. So, but doesn't mean it's not a term of art. So, which is how I would interpret it too, because deduction means you're deducting it from something.
And what's the opposite of deductions?
It says they're deductions from your wages. But I think we've already decided that wages was too general to be. I mean, we already have a specific version of wages we're talking about. And we want to also capture things like tips, commissions, et cetera, without creating dedicated attributes for them. So
In and out?
I think in and out works pretty well. And then you can simplify your, if you want to go back to doing your screen share, sorry, I stopped it.
That is not the one.
You could have your, that could that be an income list? I'm curious. Is there any reason it wouldn't be an income list? The in
This,
would be an
in
income
and
list
out?
and the out would be an income list.
Things like market value balance would,
Again, like
Be
put aside the
excessive.
current methods and we could rearrange where those are,
Okay.
but also, I mean, who cares if they're things you don't use? That's okay. It's good to have it represent how you use it, but you don't have to use everything all the time. There's a lot of value to have consistent interfaces.
yeah,
and
no,
do
I
those
agree. I
consistently.
agree with that for sure. I'm not arguing. From what I can tell, I could see income list working if some of the interface of it maybe changed a little bit.
Well, no, don't change it. You don't want to,
But I'm not keeping am I keeping everything the way it came in from the original file? We said we might be changing it.
well, okay, so I wouldn't say like make a copy of income list and like say this is the income list for the pay stub. That's what I mean.
Yeah, no,
If
I
you didn't
mean
need to.
changing the original income list.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Then you don't care about a lot of the things that you were having trouble coming up with labels for once we've made this change, right? And you can remove a lot of code, I think.
Okay, now just a silly question. Where is this
That'll be
on
good.
the original code? Is it a separate repo, or how do you inherit?
It's right here. That's where it comes from.
And I
I can put that in the chat if you want.
No, I don't. I just asked.
Okay.
it's going to be a copy and paste, Lily, because we were like thinking about how the existing one worked and not wanting to break the way people used it. But thinking this was a general enough need that we wanted to have a version that was itself more general.
I would want to understand. Sorry, go ahead, Lily. I'll talk more in a
So
second.
you're basically saying copy whatever that has been coded into this tool and then inherit it and then override it, add additional whatever.
Well, we're just making our own. We're basing it off of the other code, but we're just making it our own.
And then use a similar inheritance pattern, but not necessarily saying we're going to inherit and then rename it. So like there's an income class in the thing we linked you, and we wouldn't have an income class and then inherit from it for AL income. We would just be like, here's our copy of the income class. We call it AL income and has slight differences.
Or more than slight differences, depending on what happens. But
I would say like, I would be careful of like scope. So like that was actually tested on like a 400 question interview. So like before you change stuff, you want to make sure you know what it does and why. But that doesn't mean that it's
yeah,
not.
that's why I haven't changed a lot of stuff. That's why we're discussing it. So
Well, you
yes.
just said it's going to have a lot of changes. So I just want to be cautious.
I
about
said
scope
it
for that reason.
might have a lot of changes.
Okay.
Mostly depending on these discussions. Okay. I'm just gonna go randomly changing stuff.
So
Or I'll try not to.
yeah, I mean, I think when you're like, well, what is this for? Like you might look at it and say, you might look at the SSI interview and say, oh, this is where it's needed to do this dumb thing they do in that form. Some of the things got better with the new version of the form, which came out like a year and a half into the project.
Okay.
but some of them didn't. So like I had to fit,
The SSI interview is in the original library for this.
no,
Where is the SSI interview?
I've linked it to you before, but I'll link it on the chat, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
That's the actual real test of all these features, and everything was added to fit the specific needs of that form. So, oh, I
Okay.
guess I used it another place in made. That's why there's that toJSON method to do an intake. So I used it for an intake there. You don't, but that's not going to be very informative for you. I'm just saying, like,
Okay.
I mean, you can, if you want, you can list it there. So it's fine. I'm not going to stop you from writing it down. I'm just saying it won't be as.
Well, I'd like to include stuff that's like useful in here. I don't want to.
They used like a
include
tiny
kind of-
subset basically, and it's like I added one method to fit that use.
Okay. But this is what like is defining the majority of the uses. So does an income, I don't understand exactly what kind of, so an income can be any of the kinds of assets or like,
Anything that earns somebody money is an income,
or that also loses some as well.
and there's no reason it couldn't be a negative income. Yeah.
Income is like a bank account.
It could be a bank account. There's an asset. I think I might have not had the asset class before I created some of these methods on the top level income.
Mhm.
So I think there was a reason why some of the things exist there, but there is an asset method in here, right? Or an asset class.
Wait.
Asset.
Income?
I mean, there's an asset class in here. Yes. Yep. There is. Sorry, go
wouldn't
ahead,
think of-
Lily.
They made that comment on 216. I wouldn't actually think of it like a bank account. But
Right, that's
I think
my
bank account could be an
question.
example.
I
of
wouldn't
it.
think of income as a bank account.
And definitely not
Just-
an income
Some
list.
people may
We're
never
in
have a bank
mental.
account. They just cash their
No,
check.
I just mean as a mental model. Like income list doesn't give me anything to grab hold onto. I don't have any associations with that in real life, but I know what a bank account is. So I'm
Okay.
just saying for me.
Okay.
I would put that on the income class, not the income list class. That description.
That description on the income class, but the
Yeah.
income,
Not the income list.
so what is the analogy for the income list? No,
It's someone's
okay,
total
and I'm more
annual
confused.
income. An income,
Yeah,
well, it
so
doesn't have to be
it's as
their
if you
total.
have a bank account and you have a bunch of incomes in it, right? Like assets and job income and like car money from cars and like all of everything is in your bank account, right?
What's
It's
really
a list of things.
No, because in a bank account could be a single income source for you, right?
This is
It gets interest income every year. So that would be a really confusing analogy to use. Don't use that one. You'll get mixed up because the fact that it can contain itself sometimes.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, I
income-
need some kind of
income is
mental
just-
model for an income list.
Because, okay. Now I'm trying to remember what I did in the financial statement interview. Income is so broad of a category. It can come from your job, that's one. It can come from your child support. And it can come from your retirement. It can come from your investment. It can come from any kind of source. I mean,
Sure. I just don't know how like anything else can be an income list then. Because like a in and out is not an income list. In does not have like
It means income, that's a short name for it, that's all, but the source.
Yeah, but when you have a pay stub and it has an in list and an out list, those don't feel like they can be income lists because of everything that's in income list. Like just
I
doesn't
think maybe
make sense to me.
it would be helpful to draw some kind of a chart or a graph or something. First to define the concept before we get into the details of
And
codes.
and it just occurred to me, one of the reasons that I made AL pay stub into a list was because then I could get all things by sources. So that will have to be, I just have to make a note that AL sources will have to take into account the existence of tool, not AL sources, but sources will have to take into account the two lists.
Is there like a really good, like kind of diagramming tool for like a quick chart? I'm never really good at this. I could probably like use a whiteboard, but I'd probably be kind of slow to do it.
I mean, there's
yeah.
Figma and there's
that wouldn't be that good
Canva.
for me, but
Canva. I don't
let me just try a whiteboard for now and we'll just see. So maybe that's not that good. I feel like it's going to be really annoying to work with, but okay, we have an income and I'm not so sure what I would want to start drawing out here. But I mean, do you understand that people have different ways that they make people have different things that pay for their living expenses, right?
Sure.
So you might have disability benefits. You might have money that a partner or parent or spouse gives you. That's income. You have bank accounts. And if you earn any interest, even a penny a year, that's a kind of income that you get. And when you go to file your taxes, you list all, they want to know about all the different ways that you make money, essentially, potentially. Some of them might be gifts and maybe they're not taxable. You might have to talk about multiple ways you get money on your tax filing. Even more intrusive and nosy are a lot of the places that try to qualify you based on your income. They're going to want to know about every way you make money again there. Some of them are going to be things that you earn. Some of them are going to be things that are just given to you. Some of them are going to be from passive investments that you have. Those things all together make up your income. And if we zoomed in on a pay stub, in your pay stub, right, you have multiple types of things there too that make up what you earn from that one job. So it's really just like a fractal. Your job isn't just what you make from your hourly wages or your salary. It's going to be affected both positively and negatively by your base salary or your base hourly wage. It's going to be increased by tips, increased by commissions you earn, and increased by whatever commissions. And then it's going to be reduced by the taxes you pay, by your union dues, your health insurance. So you take home a certain amount, but it's this multi-part thing, just like your annual income is the same way. It's a multi-part thing too. You were asking a question, which I'd love to answer because I bet it's really helpful to help explain this idea.
I don't remember what I was asking. So, but maybe it'll come back in the future.
That's why I think an income list could be the right model. If the name is confusing to you, I guess it seems clear enough to me that it's like we're zooming in on like the micro level for the income, which is made up of the separate incomes. But
I just don't know why in money for pay stubs, like there's a I still don't, you're okay if in money for pay stubs has a market value, et cetera, is what I'm gathering. Like that's fine.
It's okay if it has extra
And-
stuff if you don't use them in the, but it's probably better pattern to like take out the things that aren't really needed or move them to a lower level where they're actually needed.
So
for
I
example-
would have to make a list that was not an income list. I don't know how to take out. Do you delete market value? Do you delete self market value? Like how do you?
Well, you don't necessarily need to have it be 100% model. It's about what's helpful, what's useful. So if you are only using the income list in the context of the pay stub class, that's not public information about the list when it comes to other people in the world, right? They don't need to know that you're using that's an income list. So they won't have any access to those methods. It's not technically a private method because that doesn't
But as long
exist
as
in
it has
Python.
the same signatures for the part that is necessary, then you can make your own if none of the functions in it are like particularly useful, or if you have to change a lot of them. I just, when you change the behavior, I don't know. Like maybe there'll be parts that are useful. I can try and see if there will be parts that are useful. Just, I feel like I'll be
I don't know if that's
overwriting
the
most
right
of
way
it.
to think about it. Like, I don't see why you'd be overwriting any of it if you're not using some certain things.
No,
But it is,
but you
makes
said
sense to start from
you
simpler to
said
more
you would
complex.
remove some of it. So how would you? Okay,
well, you're copying in the income list class, right?
and
So-
then how do you remove methods from an income from another class?
You just delete those lines from that in the copy of the income list class definition that you bring in.
I
just
thought
will
you
not
were
have those
saying you
methods.
would super. That's what I was saying about copying, but you said you should use it. What I understood was you should inherit from it. Maybe I misunderstood that.
This
Like, I
is
don't
gonna be-
understand how to inherit
and you're
from
not
it
using it.
and delete it. But delete
Make
the
it
parts
I
fit.
of it.
don't understand why this is an issue. Okay, let's say you inherit the market value and you don't need it, just don't touch it. Why is that a problem?
Well, because it's another functionality that you do have to like maintain, because if it's broken, then and people
if
try
you're
to
not
use it, then it
using
is a problem. Well, if you say, if you prevent people from using it, then sure. But like,
let's
if
say I
you're-
inherit from numbers, right? Like
Mhm.
there's numbers in the world. Well, I don't care about imaginary numbers. I don't care about rational or floating point numbers. I'm only going to use integers. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily stop me from using the number as the concept to represent what I'm talking about.
well, if I were to make an integer, then I would want to like take a part of numbers, not all of numbers, because I wouldn't want to support floats. I wouldn't want people to be able to use, float on my integer.
It's come back to reality. Okay, Caroline wants this thing, and she is working on a financial statement. The financial statement does have some boxes for market value. Does that help?
No, because it's depends if it's associated with a job or not, because we're talking about creating a new class. But listen, if what I understood was that the signature matters, I at various points it sounds like you're saying do inherit, and at other points it sounds like folks are saying don't inherit. And I'm not sure which one people have settled on. Like,
So it's about like there's like just the coding idea of like not repeating yourself, right? If what you
Yeah.
have already exists in the world is a good model for it, then use it. You're maintaining less code when you do that. If you copy and paste code more than is necessary and you have similar behavior in different classes represented twice, that has a risk. Now, there's also a risk to trying to use too much inheritance, and that can overcomplicate stuff. It's not like an all or nothing thing. There's a balance between those two different poles. Polls. meaning
If,
like-
yeah, if
So-
all of the, like, if they only inherit one or two methods, then what that seems to do, to my mind, is just make you go look up those methods when you need to know anything about them. If you're copying like most of it or just adding on to it, then that makes sense to me. But if you're going to be, every time you just want to find out how sources are gotten, you have to go to another class, and that's the only reason. That doesn't seem more maintainable to me.
So that's the whole idea of inheritance in object-oriented programming, which not everyone thinks is a good pattern, but it is how object-oriented programming works.
I think it's not an all or nothing proposition. You don't inherit just because of one method and then not use the rest of them and then overwrite all the rest of them. That doesn't seem practical.
Well, again, it's not about overwriting methods, like unless you need that method in
Exactly,
your
but that's what
class.
I'm saying. If you're overwriting all except for one method, then that doesn't seem like a good trade-off to me.
Okay, to me, I came from a different background,
Mhm.
and it always it's in the back of my mind. I know it may not be applicable here because we have a small team, but I think there's some value in that. So let me just say it.
Mhm.
We always start with the specs. You define what you're working on, what is the limitation. You draw a rough picture of what this project is about. So within that framework, then you start to work, and then it's easy to test. It's easy to maintain because later on you can come back to say, okay, now I want to expand or I want to eliminate something that's outdated. You have something to base on. We spend probably a third of our time on each project working on that document, okay? And we have been doing that for since day one, and it's why? Because it's worth it. It's a headache to do it. It's a headache, but we all know it's valuable. Now come to our reality here. We cannot afford that. I understand. But if we at least we don't do the any details, just outline the scope. What's the purpose? What's the target? What are the limitations that we don't want to go beyond it? If we spend a few hours develop that thing, then we have a framework to work with. In this case, if we know the scope of the existing module, and we define the scope of what we want to expand, then we compare. If, let's say, 50% of these two match, maybe we say, okay, that's worth to inherit. If it's only 10%, we say, okay, it's not worth it. So that'll be to me at least, that'll be an easy decision to determine if we want to inherit or not. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Thank you.
I think so. The only other thing I would say is like jumping into like your question about like I don't care about the the market value. Like just move that method. That's what I kept trying to say. Like just if it doesn't belong on the income, move it up to the job or wherever it's used. Is it used in 3 different classes that inherit from income? You can have one more intermediate class that those inherit from. That's like income with market values or something. So like you're not really adding a bunch of extra functionality that's not ever used in the child classes, but you're also not creating a copy of the class with its own version of the code to maintain. Every time you do something that's exactly the same thing, but a subset, right? Like try to make the subsets, the supersets rather, you try to make the base class to pretty little, and then you try to have child classes that inherit the functions and add on things that they need. And then if there's a grandchild class, because you're like, hey, it turns out we have assets and we have I don't know what it might be, maybe a mortgage, whatever, and it has a market value and it has a total. So those should use the same parent class. So we need to make an intermediate class. That's fine. But
All
the
right,
point
I'll
is to
look up
avoid
market value and
ever
find out.
copying and re-implementing a thing that's the same, like, right? Or even just like the basic concept is the same. It's like we're trying to represent money. Let's use a class that's about money for all of the things that are about money.
Right. I
You
mean,
do have some freedom that no one's using this class yet, so you don't have to try to make it compatible with the old thing. But I think the concepts are validated in the fact that they worked for two different income statements. They worked for the SSI one, and they also, it's used by the Dead Broke Dads interview too.
yeah.
So,
I think I'm going to have to do more looking up of what things like market value are, what things like assets are, and get some like financial knowledge to understand where those things do fit. Because I wouldn't know where to move market value to or balance to.
I mean, you could
Yeah, I
just
don't know
start
where.
out by removing those methods. But I don't think, I mean, I think the idea that you have to maintain it because it's there in a parent class isn't true. Like people only access it in the parent class, especially when you're doing object composition. You have an interface to it, which is your total method. You don't want people directly interacting with the methods of the .in and .out outside, right? You can assume, you can essentially encapsulate that internal behavior. One other thing that I want to just throw out there, which is even after all this advocating I've been doing for making it inherit from income or composed from an income list, is that maybe a dictionary is the right thing to store it in, because it will really simplify the YAML. If you can have, because you know in advance the kinds of deductions people have. We talked about this on the call on Friday, or no, sometime last week. I guess maybe it was Monday, because it wasn't on any calls on Friday.
Yeah,
we
I
talked about.
took notes from it.
Okay.
What we actually ended up saying was it would be a list. So that was like our conclusion then,
Yeah.
but we can revisit that for sure.
It does mean you can't have someone enter their whole pay stub on one page, though, when you make it a list, right? Because you don't know the indexes in advance.
You don't know what?
You don't know what index they're using in advance. And people
Index.
generally do only have one of each thing. They have one wage. I guess maybe commissions and tips could be double.
Are we talking right now about a list of pay stubs or a single pay stub?
Single pay stub.
Okay. Yep. I think they only have one of each type of line item, which is what I was calling them, type of in and type of out, whatever.
I think line item is a good name for those.
But I mean, we're not using it anymore, right? Because we just said that's what in and out is, right?
In and out
is-
would be a list of line items, right? Conceptually for you. And then whether you need a separate class to present it or not is what I'm trying to figure out. If you wanted to make the line items class be a dictionary, that would make it so that you could have one screen of your interview where you had people type wages, tips, commissions, and so on one screen. If you make somebody, if you have that be a list rather than a dictionary, I don't know how you do that. You have to make them use the add another button, I guess, and then choose from a dropdown what kind of item it was this time. It would be much clunkier for someone to enter that information.
I mean, the way I'm doing it now is I have a page where it asks, which of these do you have for your job? Tips, deductions, commissions, garnishments, that kind of thing.
And then it asks them on a follow-up screen.
Yeah, asks them for amounts on follow-up screens.
One at a time.
Yeah, so that's what it's doing as a list right now.
So if you made it a dictionary, it could be one screen with not required fields.
Where you would just do add another.
No, you would ask the interview author. Well, either way, the interview author has to say what kinds of positive and what kind in and what kind of out. incomes they had on their pay stub, right? Line items on their pay stub. The author
Yeah,
makes that
I mean,
choice.
the author is the one who is making the list of things to pick from, right? What do you have in this job? The author of the interview is making that list at the moment. That's
So,
happening in the interview.
so you have a minimum of 2 screens to do that.
Yeah, I'm
Versus-
still not understanding what the one screen would look like. Could you like kind of tell me what the input, what the different fields would be?
So it would say, you know, enter information from your pay stub. There'd be 1 line for wages, 1 line for tips, 1 line for medical insurance, 1 line for, you know, and those would correspond to keys in this in or out dictionary.
I mean,
I could show the code that I'd be thinking of there too.
yeah, that would be great.
The YAML code is what I'd be working on here. So,
Okay.
and then we should sign off soon, but we're over. But that happens. This is hopefully it's a helpful discussion.
I think so.
Okay, because I realize like ultimately this is your class that you're designing, but hopefully it's helpful to. I think it's going to be something that's going to be used in a lot of interviews. So I think because I
think
thought
some
about it so
care
much.
about the details is super important. Yeah, and if there are, yeah, thoughts that you had in the past that things that weren't being addressed.
Of course, like data type currency, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. I get.
I just want to do one more. Sorry. And this should be dot in. Right, same idea.
Mhm.
And I obviously those are terrible labels. I wouldn't want to use what you pay for all of them, but
Sure.
that was what I was thinking. You could do this on one screen. Someone already knows in advance, and all of these could be required false.
I think yeah, could you paste that to me? I think the downside we came up with at the time was that you then can't arbitrarily add to them.
Sounds like you're not letting people do that anyway right now, are you?
I am.
Okay, so that after they've checked those boxes, they can add additional things that aren't
Oh, the user?
boxes. Yeah.
I haven't written that question, but they could. Yeah.
But here they could too, as long as the keys are unique for each thing. I guess you could generate those semi-randomly, right? Like random new other 1, other 2. You could have that be dynamically generated, I guess.
Yeah.
Or you could allow people to nest them, where there'd be like an overall other category and everything underneath there would itself be given a separate label.
Say that again.
You could let people arbitrarily nest, N-E-S-T, the different groups.
Nest into that I don't see.
If you would be a list.
That-
It would be a
That sounds,
linked list kind of structure.
like a wages would be a type of job.
You could have like dot out other be itself be a list of. It could itself be an income list.
I see, have a dot out other specifically. And then that would be a list as opposed to an object? Or that would also be a dictionary or whatever.
Okay, no, I mean, I guess we wouldn't call it that. I would just call it a line items object. I guess be dictionary in this. Then you'd have
But it
to
would
change
be,
your
but it
total
would be a
method.
totally different data structure than all of the other outs, right?
It would be different data structure than the other outs. So you would have to let the out handle both kinds. And that's not unusual. Like, so in a linked in a graph, for example, you have a node which can itself have children or not. So there might be some flag that's like has children true. Wouldn't necessarily have to be a different data structure, but it would have to have some flag that told you how it's being used in this context. That may not be good design. I think it's probably way more complicated than you need here, because I don't think
I mean, I
why
was
would you-
thinking in would be a list of some kind. And you, I mean, you could have code that would, you'd loop through to create the fields or to create the, yeah, you're right, that it would, you'd need code to generate the fields for the ins and the outs.
But instead of doing a loop for multiple screens, enter your information about wages on one screen, enter your information about health insurance on another screen, you could have the checkboxes structure that you talked about, have
Mhm.
someone check off the things that they have, and then use the code version of you could limit it to 2 fixed screens, is my point. This version
Yeah.
lets you do one screen. If you do the
Yeah.
check off and then a follow-up screen, you could make that one screen where the fields are generated by code. So let me mock that out, I guess. Oh. And this should be of the attribute, right? And it should be like, so user.jobs.
Mhm.
Not in, it should be like line types present or whatever. And I guess we should have what money do you earn? And like, what deductions do you see? What else was there? Sure, health insurance. Okay, and then that would be like something like let's see, it would be like, right, something like that,
Yep.
where you generate the field for each thing, and it would be that's what I think you could do as an alternative
Okay.
while keeping your list structure.
Mhm.
So that you could still have one screen where you have people put the information in. It's kind of nice if it's dynamic, I think. But if you keep it as a list, you can't give it an index dynamically, right? Like, so that, I suppose what you could do is have the questions be pre-generated, then process them.
Mhm. So what I've done is I do a loop where I get all the sources, as it were, and then I loop through to append an object and give it its like source or type or whatever, right?
So you already are collecting it with a different name and then adding it to the list in code.
So I'm gonna share real quick to I'll just share the playground because it's just faster that way right now. So this is basically and then later I iterate to get the details of each item that has been appended.
Okay, I think that's interesting, but you're not like using any of it. You're using the same pattern as DocAssemble, but you're not using any of its item gathering features here.
Well, here I am.
I find it a little bit verbose, but I think if it works, it works.
I mean, I think maybe I didn't post here. Maybe I didn't end up posting it, but I'm like, it's been so long since I've gathered items. I was like, sure, like this didn't error, you know?
Yeah.
Like I don't, and
The
I
only
mean, if
thing
you
I
have
see
alternative
here
code
is if
for
it's
this,
not
then
item
love
potent,
it. Mhm.
like you might end up with extra copies of each item if you go back or something. I would have the first line here be something like X.
I mean, if you have
clear.
if you have a better pattern for this, then I'd rather just have a better pattern as
Okay.
opposed to having, so like, if you want to point me to something, I would be happy to change this to something else because it
Well,
definitely had item potency issues.
The two methods I show you wouldn't need any code block to manipulate the adding to the list because it would just let DocAssemble implicitly create the object for you with the right data type.
Okay, and you pasted that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The two different code snippets are both different ways. Like, I think the first one is assuming it's a dictionary. The second one is assuming it's a list. So let me
Okay. I see how it short circuits it. Got it.
It's going to add that annotation that's for the list.
But that means that they all. Like, where's the variable name in there? Maybe that's part of the problem.
You want to show what you're looking at? Is it the thing I shared on Teams? I can do that quickly if you.
So, okay,
Sorry, if you had
No,
it ready,
that's
you can
okay.
share it too.
that's
The
okay.
variable name.
So kind of the variable name down here, like we have the label, right?
Mhm.
And I assume that's the label. Oh,
That would be the
item,
label. Yeah.
but what is, evaluates to string somehow?
It would be a string. Yeah. The checkbox returns a string data type. It's a value, a list of strings when you do true values.
And this is the variable that it's setting.
Yeah. I might have that inverted. I don't know. I just was typing it from memory. So you should test
But
it
this
if it's
is still an
backwards.
object then. It's not, I guess.
Yep.
It's still not a list.
Oh, no, you're right. That's not really right. Should be just I and J, probably, right?
What are I and J here?
Good call.
Jobs I dot in.
So we could have multiple
J.
jobs. I'm assuming we just assumed we're going to have a list of our pay stubs. I guess maybe I should have changed jobs to pay stubs throughout.
That's okay.
No, I think it's going to be, if we're trying to like give you something to look at later and use, it's good to have it right here.
Okay.
Let me use it.
I in J sets it to the string value, but it doesn't set it to an object of. It's a list of
Assemble makes an
strings.
object when you said that
Because
this is
you
going
said
to be a list of
object type.
objects of this object type. Yeah,
Okay.
I would do that in the constructor in the
Yeah.
init method of that,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Well, I mean,
list or dictionary.
Again, I can't have it be a separate class because it needs to access its, I guess it could be a separate class and you just never access it directly, like you said. Just no one ever accesses it directly.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll put this on the Teams thread. They could, yeah, okay, right. All they care about is that, I guess we might want to have this be dot value. Again, I keep making little mistakes, trying to type it quickly.
You could edit what you have there.
Yeah, the search and replace was going to just be harder to do, but yep. We would actually want to set the dot. What is it? Is it dot value or dot amount?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I mean, I don't know that I have like a question of like, what is the difference between the word value and amount?
Amount's the method, right?
Right, but what is the, like, they seem like the same thing conceptually, and so I haven't understood why, like what the difference is definitionally, like what is the term of art amount mean versus the term of art value?
It's constructed for this class, but I just mirrored the way that Jonathan did it in his simple value class.
Oh,
I didn't.
do we have to mirror that?
I think there's a good reason for it. Again, like changing stuff, you always want to know like, why am I changing it? And am I making it Am
just
I
seems unclear,
simplifying
that's all.
something that then, as
It
soon as
just
I try to use it in
seems-
the real world, I was like, oh, that's why they didn't do it the simple way. That's what happens a lot.
That's what I'm trying to find out for sure. It just seems like a confusing way to differentiate between them when they like are doing different things and they are synonyms as words.
It's because you want to have something you can set directly and then something that you can check with the total method, right? Of the
Definitely. I'm
list.
just saying that the names might be improved. That's all.
I would say, like, if you just think I have a better name and there's a pattern that people are using that's in the documentation, probably it's not worth the change generally,
Okay.
just because you think it's a clearer name, because then you're having everybody learn your way of doing it. So I try to not change names when there's not a really good reason to do it for that reason, if it's something that's documented. But sometimes it's not enough of a pattern people have been following that you can reinvent it. But you need those two things. They really are the same, right? But one is the thing you set directly, one's the thing you calculate from. And in some cases, for very simple iterations of that, maybe you make the dot amount method have a just return the value. It's going to be identical. In some cases, it might be changing the sign. In some cases, it might be doing some math on two other attributes of the thing. So
I'm trying to understand if the amount,
given that you said like you're still trying to figure out what the concepts are, my guess is changing the names isn't the first place you should go. Like, you can let the knowledge that's been out there already to come up with the names be as is, rather than change your understanding of it, rather than
right, but
changing,
I'm trying to
like,
understand what the meaning of amount is in the doc assemble object, because I think it's a way of accessing it without having to access dot exists, which is different than returning a value that is related to a period,
that's one
like
thing it
turning a
does differently.
calculated value.
That's yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's Jonathan's way of doing it, where he made it into his pattern where you're only going to have one of every type of income, which I don't think works for real world representation of values. So that's like a really implementation detail, which I didn't copy at all. I don't think the dot exists is used in the income module that I wrote. But I still think the idea of having an amount method, which does some math for you maybe, or maybe it has some logic inside it, would carry over really well to various complicated iterations of things that earn people money.
I just wanted to do an expected calculation, which amount doesn't tell me what I'm expecting to get back. Like if I just have an amount method, I'm like, amount of what? Like, what is that based on? Like, amount. I mean, for a job, it would for like a job, it'd be like, is amount gross? Is amount total? Is amount net? Like,
That's
what
why I had
is-
a net and a gross value, that method that were separate in
I
my
know,
class.
but I'm just saying that the name amount isn't as specific as either gross or net, and it doesn't tell me what it's doing.
It's usually
That's-
pretty good for a base class to not be like super opinionated about that stuff, but
But it's doing a very specific calculation, right?
it can vary depending on what class you're inheriting. Like, right, like your class that inherit your child class might do something totally different, but it should do something that's consistent with the way that the financial list object in the documentation works. And for us, the income list object works. It should do something that's not too unexpected, but it should be unique to each object type. Or it shouldn't be overridden. It should either use the base implementation, or if it overrides it, that's fine, as long as it's not going to violate someone's expectations.
Yep, I'm just gonna look up what amount actually means in DocAssemble and see like if that is the same thing that I am trying to do. If that is the like thing that I want to pass up to everything, or if I'm doing something different with my
Okay.
amount.
Yep. I mean, I guess I would, like, we did give you like a really broad scope here, but I would just be careful about over broadening your own scope to redesign something that, just be careful about that.
Yep.
Because it may not have, it may end up making it really hard to make any progress on stuff if you question everything or change everything. It took a long time to make the class as it is, and it was tested on a real code thing and a real implementation. And
Yeah, the problem is
I
that
feel a
I
little
don't
worried about how many
understand
different
the
ideas
context,
there are.
right? I don't understand which parts were designed for what reasons. So either I need to figure it out or just blindly kind of hack at what's there and pretend that, and just like I don't know how to iterate on it without understanding why it's doing the things it's doing, right?
So I guess like an answer could be like limit the iterations and just implement this new class. But that seems like a smaller scope than the things that you're thinking of changing to me. But okay. All right. I think we all have probably been on an hour too long. So sign off for today.
All right,
And feel
thank
free to
you.
keep asking questions on Teams too, of course.
Yeah, thanks. Right, bye.